Book VII, The Rakshasajinns' Reign, The Fall. Chapter 35, The Tech School. The second act of vandalism. Around this time, a band of invaders returned to Londinium with a more severe set of attacks on their headquarters. The damage to their headquarters had been pretty severe, not seen since the days of the earthquake. The kobolds had pretty sore memories of those earthquake days, and remembered how they had to find shelter in this town known as Pineborough. By this time, the Defense League of Londinium long suspected that the attacks were the work of some offspring Rakshasajinns. As to which ones, this was not known. Some had even suspected that the Dustonians were behind this, despite being long banished to the desert. Many suspected that the ones behind this was the governor, who was still missing. Many feared that there still had been trolls in Hyteria, still out there biding their time before taking over Londinium in vengeance. After these current attacks, the Defense League now suspected this to be the work of the offspring parents, the Hypocordos. What was well documented was that there were many slum towns in Londinium where many exiled enemies resided, possibly some Hypocordos, Meludicos, Skinnerites, Dustonians, trolls, surviving sorcerers, and reptilians. When it came to the headquarters, it was declared unstable. The kobolds had been greatly distraught over this, after they had just had it repaired and spent their funds to complete the bridge on these repairs. The Londinians suggested that the kobolds return to Atlantis to ask for help. However, the Atlanteans had become hostile with the kobolds, as the promise for rebuilding the bridge had not been completed, and were banned until they came up with the funds to complete their promises. The Londinian Defense League took a trip into the slums of Gallicanium to see what they could find. After some fruitless searches, the Defense League found this town known as Gamsoiled. In the town, the Defense League came across a pub and found a strangely dressed man with a dark-skinned slave chained up. The slave owner was speaking with some Meludicos. This man explained that the Londinian had been given refuge to some of their escaped slaves who destroyed his fortune. The slave owner complained about how he lost his hired job after his boss shut down their company after being reunited with his son. This slave owner ranted about how he had great ambitions to throw out his softy and become the unfortunate king of the company. Then the slave owner gives one Meludico with a horrible toupee a rare object resembling orange tentacles from a town known as Thatri in Atlantis. When the slave owner left his slave behind to make a secret deal, he came over to the Defense League, giving them the message in a Hamatarian language. This was written on a scroll on a piece of parchment. Uriyama's vision and Kashmir's retirement. In the Akashic Hall of Prophecies, the Watchman found an orb intended for Uriyama. Uriyama was summoned over to the Watchman. What the Watchman saw. This is the account that Uriyama observed. There was a warning call issued all over the city. Schools included that there were terrorist attacks from Al-Qaeda. The cities call for a state of emergency and are ordered to hide in some secret hideouts. The students in hiding have an impossible time finding safety, as there are dark spirits in the schools tipping off the terrorists. Uriyama knew well that Melendul, Kashmir, and Alexander were in battle against these offsprings, and some Meludicas were making trouble in Cytopond. At this, Uriyama summoned the three to an emergency meeting. After Uriyama relayed what he had seen, Melendul realized that Cytopond and the Essex region had been under the hands of the Rakshasajinns. Melendul explained how the offspring had, for the past 3 months, been making trouble in Cytopond. Now the offsprings prepared their attacks in the final semester, knowing full well that Cytopond High had been a haven for many of Melendul's charges. The hypercoders knew that many of the major charges had graduated, while others would be graduating the next year, which would break the protection Cytopond had from the reign of the Meludicos. The offsprings were sent to make trouble and set up some followers to break all ties to the charges had to this school. Then Kashmir made an announcement that his term was up and that it was near time for his retirement. The four were all distraught about the news, but knew the Magnus laws. After Kashmir made this announcement, he brought a temporary successor known as Dugmatius, the Certain from the 6th Anagrammatron order. Kashmir knew that in times of upheaval, worse than had been seen in a long time, that Dugmatius could be very helpful. Plus, Kashmir was making some preparations to keep Brutus at bay as long as possible. Now Kashmir had known Brutus for a long time, and did not think he was anywhere near competent enough to take on the roles as a Synexit. Melendul was not thrilled about working with Dugmatius, as he knew that anagrammatrons from the 6 orders and his charges have not always been a good fit. The end of summer. In mid-August, the week after the Italian festival, the summer started going quite downhill. Milo was 2 months away from starting at Maltech Institute and would not be returning to Cytopond High. On Tuesday, the Filintinos invited Milo back to visit the shrine. Milo wanted an opportunity to speak with the priest at the shrine about exorcism and demonic activity. As it was, Milo had become more suspicious of strange paranormal activity. That afternoon, on the way to the shrine, Milo had remembered having gone there the year before starting his senior year, and his anticipations of seeing Amira frequently in school, along with his plans to take her to the homecoming. When the Filintinos arrived at the shrine, Milo did not feel quite the same and was a bit uneasy. Milo remembered how 4 years ago, on a Wednesday to the week, he started getting the same uneasy feelings like when he was starting high school. At the shrine, Milo had started to talk with the priest, but Aunt Michelle called him over as they were going to be heading home. Actually, they were going back to the cafe for dinner. On Thursday, Eustace was becoming more snobbish. While Eustace was over in the afternoon, he had taunted Milo about the Jafaris and Amira and threatened to rat him out. Milo started getting pretty angry at Eustace and his threats and started spinning a CD player cord in front of him. Eustace then threatened to tell the police if he laid a hand on him. That evening, on the way to the Filintinos for dinner, Milo walked down to their house and started to think about how different things were when the summer had begun, and this breath of fresh air. It had just seemed like the summer was becoming quite stale, and there was nothing more to look forward to. Milo remembered having gone to feed the fishes early in the summer, and Lydia's pageant. As for Salvatore, he was becoming even more annoying. Salvatore had told Aunt Michelle and Uncle Ottavio to talk Milo out of his interest in physical anthropology, and told him that the subject was racist. Milo was getting sick of Salvatore constantly giving him his views on anthropology, and Milo was not going to accept his views or go along with them. On Saturday, Milo had his 19th birthday and got to see The Simpsons Season 10 as a present. Milo remembered that this was the season when he saw Amira at Duddlecip. During the day, the Biancatellos and Eustace went to Akron to visit the same Italian area Milo went on with the Filintinos 2 years ago. By this time, Milo did not have such ideal memories of that particular fall, and remembered not seeing Amira too much. The next week, Ray was off from work. That week, things had gotten much worse, as Ray made Milo work long hours on this college preparation program. This computer program was utterly burdensome, repetitive, and quite boring. It was impossible to get through the program unless the final test was passed 100%. Ray brought the program thinking that it would be helpful. However, the program was just a mere scam that taught nothing but mere memorization. Ray had Milo working on the program all day, and this drove him quite nuts. Milo hated doing this pointless activity all day and night, which started to put him in a foul mood. One night, Ray and Milo got into a major fight, as Ray wanted Milo to work on the program for a couple more hours. But Milo needed a break and was sick of this. Frankly, Milo felt like Ray was being utterly controlling. The next week, school began for Lydia, and many of Milo's friends from high school were beginning college. For Milo, his program at Maltech would not start until mid-October. With Ray being back at work, Milo was back to his normal schedule and happy to be away from that program. This year, Lydia would be starting her sophomore year, while Amira was starting her senior year. Over Labor Day weekend, things had gotten much worse. On Friday afternoon, Milo noticed that this had been the first Labor Day in a long time that he was not happy with the new school year. That night, Milo had some weird dreams about living in a dump near Newsenberg. On Sunday, at a party at Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane's, Milo was in a bad mood with Sylvester for being a brat and flipping out over some stupid stuff, almost getting him in trouble. And then Milo was mad at Salvatore for bugging him to pose for a picture. Milo did not want to pose, and Salvatore threatened to not stop bothering Milo until he did pose for this picture. Milo still refused. That night, Milo had a dream that he was starting a new school year at Cider Pond, but not seeing Amira anywhere. Because of this, Milo got into a fight with some students on the bus. Daxtividus, Vision, and Oscar. Back at the Oracle at the Hall of Prophecies, Daxtividus arrived to his water basin to see the vision concerning him. In the vision there were a series of vacation sequences. This would come to be a frequent occurrence. Some of the first sequences that Daxtividus had seen were mad kingdom rides, old-fashioned amusement parks, and the beach town in Maine. These early visions had an air of excitement, but Daxtividus recognized something very phony and impermanent about the sequences. Daxtividus had been utterly stumped over what this all meant. Then there was a majestic figure that said, "The Archon has returned." Daxtividus turned around and found this figure who was not a djinn but not an element either. This figure introduced himself as Oscar from the Rakshasajinns order. Daxtividus was a bit confused, and Oscar explained that the Rakshasajinns order is the guardians from the Anogrammatrons. Daxtividus knew something of the Guardians, but only knew their connection through the Archons. Oscar explained that Many mortals had been forced membership into a realm of the Sarkikos community. Daxividis had not been so sure what this meant, and Oscar explained that the community on Earth only members can see, but cannot see the human communities. Daxividis knew very little about the Sarkikos, and only knew that they were a kind of shadow to the mortals. Oscar explained that the cords connecting the realms of the Sarkikos and the mortals was still intact, but could one day break. Daxividis asked what this had to do with the vision in the basin. Oscar explained that humans do not belong in the community of the Sarkikos and will be very unhappy there. Daxividis asked what this had to do with the vacations. Oscar had been stumped and started to theorize that many of Melendol's charges had become held captive in the community with the Senexit Sarkikos. Oscar went on to inform Melendol of what had happened. The last month off. The months had frankly been quite boring as everyone else was in school. Milo would later attribute this to being a negative 6.25% through Maltech. Milo passed all his college preparation program eventually as he found some cheats through this pointless program. Otherwise, Milo still hated doing the program as it made him think rationally and found his left brain knowledge to be utterly boring. Now Milo just wanted to resume his art activities and other right-brained endeavors. Milo had been remembering his trip to Walt Disney World in a very fond way. Plus, Milo had very positive memories of his senior year and Amira in particular. One weekend, Milo and Eustace went on a trip with the Filintinos back to Toledo in order to visit an open market selling multiple food specialties. Salvatore had gotten a bit disappointed on the trip when the Filintinos decided to stop for lunch at the cookie cutter sandwich shop instead of a Cambodian restaurant just next door. This was only because they had a whole group of them. Otherwise, the open market was pretty cool. This was quite a big place. Then, on the way back, they stopped at a Christmas store, and Milo bought some Santa Claus thing. A few weeks before starting school, Milo enrolled in zoo volunteer work in hopes of seeing Amira soon. Now Milo did not even know if Amira would be volunteering that year, as he did not see her name written down on any of the records. Yet he found out that his friends Seamus and Stephanie were on the list, along with Lucia and Vashti. At one session, Milo saw Anahita's sister, who was a high school freshman, was also in training with Milo. Aezias' vision. Aezias had summoned Melindul, Alexander, and Dogmitius over a vision regarding one glorious holiday in the not-too-distant future. Aezias declared that the tidings of deliverance in the name of the dance, and the lights of the heaven would be proclaimed, beginning with the thrice Winterfest of the sun. Melendel had a great look of dignified triumph in his face at the news, while Alexander asked what this all meant. Asias explained that the great judge of light will return to begin the days of restoration and set things straight again. Asias explained that this will be a glorious time, full of joy and dancing. Melendel knew he had heard of some tidings like this before, but could not remember from where. Soon enough, Melendel knew well that Milo would be starting at a new school, and saw a very bleak future for him. Alexander suggested that maybe this was just the whole adjustment process to being in a new school, and he remembered the same thing happening when Milo began high school and middle school. Melendel knew that this was no ordinary case of cold feet, and summoned Dogmatius to watch over Milo at school and report any funny business. Melendel then gave Alexander the task to give Milo information regarding the first Rakshasajinn and the truth about Lucille. Melendel explained that he did not want Milo fighting the battle until he could see the magnitude of the threats he was up against. Milo's last week off. That weekend, the signs of the beginning of October were becoming quite apparent. This had been the first time ever that Milo would not be starting school so close to Halloween, when it was normally the time the September black to blues. No, this had been the first time Milo would be starting school so close to Halloween, when this was the time the September back to blues. School blues would come to its inevitable end. That weekend, Milo saw the movie American Pie, and the character Nadia reminded him of two girls he had known from Maryland's when he was real young. On the Monday of Milo's last week off, he went to a state park for rock climbing with Eustace, Lydia, and Ray, as it had been Columbus Day. Milo and Eustace accidentally knocked the cooler over after making a silly game out of moving in a twirling fashion. Milo had not been at this state park since before starting in 7th grade. One day later, Milo, Salvatore, and Lydia went out to lunch, as Salvatore had no classes that day and Lydia was off. Milo started complaining about their college preparation program on the computer, and how Ray had been giving him so many lectures on college preparation. Salvatore explained how he got the same lectures from Uncle Ottavio before starting his studies at St. Thomas Private College. On that Wednesday before orientation, Milo started to fantasize about returning to Disney World. Milo planned on going back to the park, which was the new present he had to himself for graduating from Maltech when the time comes. Milo's plan was to take his cousins, Amira and her friends, on this vacation. That night before the orientation, Milo had some strange dreams about the movie The Parent Trap, which he remembered after seeing a mirror after Duddlecap. On Thursday, Milo had his first orientation with Maltech Institute. At orientation, the headmaster introduced 4 instructors, including Mrs. DeVille, a chain smoker, and 2 male instructors who looked exactly the same. Milo saw who would be in his class and did not know a single person. In fact, some of them looked a bit sketchy, and others looked a bit nerdy. The students were given their drafting kits. Otherwise, this had been quite an ugly and rainy day. That orientation did not make Milo look any more forward to starting at Maltech. That evening, Milo was invited over for dinner at the Flintino's. Uncle Otavia mentioned Milo getting ready to start a career. Milo started thinking about how on a winter Thursday in 16 months he would be having dinner again at the Flintino's, but this time as a celebration for having graduated from Maltech. On Friday, Milo was a bit depressed, knowing that this would be his last Friday off before starting school. Much to Milo's luck, he got a call in for volunteer work at the zoo. Milo was slightly annoyed as he was depressed about starting school and just wanted to sulk. Otherwise, Milo was planning on doing some research on paranormal activity as he found some more leads. On the way over, Milo felt quite happy that he was going into drafting, as he did not want to be on any on-call jobs that would surprise him with after-hour requests. Plus, Milo was frustrated about being on-call for volunteer work and something that was obviously not life-threatening. Now, on-call is one thing Milo found irritating, and did not consider anyone having the right to expect workers to be available on the rough time and expect them to drop whatever they're doing for some pseudo-emergency. When Milo entered the zoo main building, he saw Nusha being dropped off by her bunny. While volunteering, Milo had the task of going around substituting for people who needed breaks. Milo still felt a little down, but did not have to deal with too many kids, as it was quite a rainy night. At one exhibit, Milo overheard some girls talking about working at the kids' clothes store and having to listen to annoying songs over and over again. On break, Milo went over to a bridge, which reminded him of the Holy Week when he was 10 at the Duddlecap. Milo started thinking more about that spring break and how he had seen the mirror at Duddlecap. What Milo was actually remembering was his summer camp that Liliana ran and the trip they took to the zoo. At the end of volunteer work, Milo looked through the schedule and found that Amira and Roshanat were working on the next Friday and there had been an opening. Milo took this opening for the next Friday evening. Now Milo was so excited about this prospect that he had forgotten all about starting school on Monday. All Milo knew that this would be his reward for getting through the first week at the cruel Maltec. That Saturday, Milo did his landscaping services for Grandpa Tony. Grandpa Tony asked Milo how his volunteer work was going. On that same day, Milo downloaded the song Last Kiss, which reminded him of Lucille and his conflicts years back. Milo then started to suspect that Lucille had something to do with Valentine's Day, and this started to confirm his suspicions of paranormal activity. As too much some conflict over ignoring a stupid request of a future friend of Amira had anything to do with Lucille made little sense to Milo. Milo wondered if these malevolent creatures were really acting on Lucille's order, and that she had not forgiven him over what happened so long ago. Milo then downloaded the song Teenager in Love, which he remembered from Amira's oldies concert when she was a freshman. This is another oldies song written in the 50s doo-wop style. Milo also downloaded some sacred harp hymns, which were American folk hymns written in the 17th century evangelical revivals. That Sunday, the anxiety came back, and Milo once again became anxious about starting school. Milo really wanted to believe that this school would teach him the skills to begin a meaningful career. The Raptors and the move to Gam soiled. One dark evening, the land of Galacanium came under attack from these horrible birds Sirius spoke of, known as raptors. The raptors kidnapped about half the kobolds and flew them far away from Tartaria, which included Iohones, Erondin, Guinevere, Selwyn, and Eusephus, and took them off into uncharted desert territory. The kobolds who did remain, including Elrich, Erugen, Remus, Pedestor, Jamus, Yoshiahu, Zadok, and Mardina, were horrified by the awful sight. Rivka had been utterly distraught over what happened to Iohones, and began begging the kobolds remaining for some help. Pedestor started a grand plan to find maps at Kebsuda and developed a search plan to find where the kobolds had been taken. Yoshiahu had plans to research powerful weapons to destroy the monsters, holding his sister captive. The remaining kobolds made their case to the Londinian magistrates. The Defense League revealed their findings to the kobolds. One reporter from the Defense League explained how he had seen a hooded man in Gam soiled, who was suspected to be responsible for the attacks on the headquarters. This reporter explained how this hooded figure hated Londinium. Then this reporter tells how he had been in contact with a slave. One cryptographer had translated the slave's note as thus: My master sent the vandals. My master is sending the bird monsters. My name is Taibi. I can help. The Londinium magistrates and elders decided that the kobolds would go on a quest to game soiled to find Taibi. The magistrates asked Remus, Jamus, and Eusephus to work in the game soiled to raise funds for the headquarters repair. Erogen was tasked to find Taibi. The Londinium magistrates explained that there are many job opportunities in this town to raise enough money. The kobolds were not thrilled about the mission and were a bit apprehensive. Elrich thought that this was similar to what happened when they entered Atlantica so many ages ago. The kobolds took up residency in a slummy inn owned by a very stern couple known as Tromer and Emersina. Now Tromer and Emersina hated Londinium and let the kobolds know very clearly. Now this in terms of service held that they were obligated to stay at least 4 months. According to Pedestal's calculations, they would most likely need to renew their contract for 4 more terms. There had been some strange symbols the kobolds had not understood, but signed anyways. Now the kobolds were not happy about being in this town. The kobolds found the town to be a dour and defeatist lot. The kobolds feared the game-soiled residents and could not understand why they chose to live in a society like this permanently. Now the kobolds knew that they were not going to be in this slum town permanently and preferred to get out of this place as soon as possible. Maltech Institution. On the evening before starting Maltech, Milo started getting cold feet and slightly wished he had started in June. This wish would only be short-lived, as Milo would know that such a thing was much worse. That night, Milo had a dream about finding some of America's lost items at school and attempted to return them to her. Then the morning came. That morning, Milo got ready and was a bit anxious. Milo was pretty optimistic about Maltech and saw that this would be nothing more than classes like he was a college student. Milo had been expecting that, like college, the teachers would just leave the students alone and he could just go to classes and then leave when he had none more. Milo's first day of school was an utter disaster. When he arrived, this building felt utterly cold and quite strange. Milo headed up to his classroom, with walls resembling a 19th century mental institution. Milo knew no one there, and the teachers came off as less than welcoming. The first teacher they met blatantly said that he did not pity students who had to work a job while in school, because he had one, and here he was such a provider. What happened was this teacher worked a job when he attended Maltech. This teacher, in fact, only slept on the weekends when attending school, and his life centered on Maltech. The first day was just a long day of sitting around doing nothing. When it came to the students, Milo did not find himself able to develop any chemistry. This school had many students on government programs, high school graduates who did not do too well and goofed off, and two middle-aged men. These two men were Mark and Phil, and were the only people Milo ever befriended at the school. Otherwise, Milo did not see the school as people who wanted to be there, and just a bunch of curmudgeons who had to be there. Milo was assigned to talk to one student for an exercise, and he found out the student was only in the school because he had a kid on the way and needed to be able to support him. Milo was a bit turned off, as he wanted to go to the skill to develop a design skill, not out of necessity. At lunch, the teachers ordered a pizza, and the students were still stuck in the same classroom all bloody day. During the rest of the day, teachers came in and introduced themselves, given their whole boring biographies. Most of the teachers were graduates from Maltech and never did particularly well, and otherwise seemed quite dour and bitter. Mrs. DeVille then gave the students a tour of Maltech, and Milo found himself even less impressed with the school. Frankly, it just felt like one foreign structure. If the top story was bad, this was nothing compared to the dull and gross basement, which resembled that horrible West Mesa from preschool. While touring the ground floor halls, the Hypocortos, Sheepas, Sleezum, Siran, Botkampf had taken up residency in the school. These are the Hypocortos whose offspring had been making trouble inside the pond. Sheepas, Siren, and Sleezum were the ones who sent their offspring, the Telosian and the Parasite, to Cyberpond as spies months ago in order to take up residency. Sleezum and Siren sent their offspring, the Sea Monster, to Salvatore to get a mirror out of the picture. Butkampf and Sleezum sent their offspring, the Grinch, to Diggins in order to destroy Milo's prom plans, year one. On this tour, on the ground floor, Milo saw that many students were smokers, hanging outside in the cold on a smoke break. In fact, smoking was a way for students and teachers to get to know each other. Then another teacher known as Mr. Roberta let the students know that whatever hobbies they had, just to give them up for the next 16 months. Then a career advisor came in lecturing them on making sure they keep an eye out on their job lists and apply before the program ended. Milo started worrying about what this meant for his trip to Disney World. Plus, Milo got a nasty feeling about the destiny he would have with working for a Maltech-approved company. When Milo was done for the day, he felt like he had traveled through a wormhole into a cruel and brutal world that demanded one to sacrifice living in order to survive. That dream about the mirror in the morning and heading down to Maltech almost seemed like a whole lifetime ago. That evening, Milo was utterly panicky and felt like he had just started the next dreary 40 years of his life and only had retirement to look forward to. Milo then made a decision that he would consider education after Maltech. Plus, Milo wanted to be self-employed rather than work for any system that resembled Maltech. Ray was a bit confused about why Milo would want to be self-employed, or considering going on to more education. Plus, Ray was also wondering why Milo seemed so traumatized by the school after just one day. Melendol's gratitude and call to battle. Melendol summoned Alexander and Dogmatius to the Odinian temple to thank them in their efforts. Alexander explained that the charge was not surprised about what he found out that the other charge's friends. Then Dogmatius had been given the task to reveal the truth about the charge's cousin. Alexander had been charged to provide some hopes and dreams for the hard times. Alexander knew things at the school had started to cool down and were tolerable, but Melendol reminded Alexander that this was only the beginning. Dogmatius then explained that he had seen the Hypercortos, Sheepus, Sleesum, Buttkampt, and Siren within the tech school. Melendol explained to Dogmatius that he knew that he had known Sleesum and Siren were up to no good, but had not known what they were up to. Melendol then started to suspect that Sleesum had been acting as a recruiter for the tech school, and Siren had done a good job at providing distractions and keeping the real agenda of the school hushed up. Melendol had some suspicions about what Buttkampt and Sheepus were up to, but did not know who they were really working for. Then Gregory showed up to explain his theories of what Sheepus and Buttkampt were really up to. Gregory explained that Sheepus had typically ministered to the powerless, while Buttkampt ministered to the powerful. Alexander pointed out that this was a very convenient setup. Soon enough, Daniel arrived with urgent news about the presence of an overseeing eye, appearing all over the place and inescapable. Daniel explained that this eye had been creating this confining field to the mortals. Melendol heard from Oscar and Daxividus of something the Ultrons holding in his charges captive. Daniel asked if this had anything to do with the school, and Melendol explained that this is much likely something worse. Melendol then gave Daniel the quest to find the guardian Oscar to help him find out who's behind the eye. Melendol then called for the charism of Baptist minister and abolitionist John Leland, along with the charism of Judith and St. Patrick to hit off the battle. Melendol assigned the Leland charism to make sure his charge resisted any diabolical pressures placed by the school or any other systems like this. The John Leland charism knew that this would be quite difficult times, and with the community the charge had been bound to, such defiance would result in much guilt and shame. Belendel asked Dogmatius to provide some armor for the charge, lest he be shamed into falling for this school's lies. The zoo. With that Tuesday, Margaret told Milo before school that he does not need the care of the school things once he graduates, and none of their business if he chooses higher education or self-employment. That Wednesday was Margaret's birthday, and Grandpa Tony came over for dinner. Milo then started looking through his music after dinner, which he forgot all about was starting school. This got Milo remembering how he would get to see a mirror in a few days after a few more rough days. On Thursday, Milo had been slightly depressed to be in school, as it just did not feel right to him, and he also missed being in Setterbourne School District. Milo felt out of place in school and did not feel he could ever get close to these teachers who seemed to be so corporate-hardened and students who were there by necessity. Plus, Milo was a bit disappointed that this was a more structured college, and that this was more structured than college, and had a highly interactive faculty body. Plus, Milo was not used to being in a school strictly for studies and having no social life in the school. Milo had not experienced this with school since that horrible third grade year. Finally, the day came for Milo to do volunteer work at the zoo after a long first week. At school, Milo was excited to get away from Maltec for 2 days. For a snack, Milo had some Iranian dish he made the day before, which reminded him of a chutney he had at an Indian restaurant years back. Milo started getting a bit superstitious and brought a rosary and a bottle of holy water in his pocket to the zoo. Milo's scheduled task had been to go around and sub for volunteers when they needed breaks. When Milo entered the zoo main building, he got a brief glimpse of 2 black-haired girls getting out of a car. After Milo was waiting for a while, Amira showed up with her sister Roshinak, and then Nusha and Vashti appeared. Then there was a vision of an angel known as Glory playing a trumpet, and the fiery Baptist preacher John Leland calling for war against the slave drivers and pointing to the great commander in heaven promising victory over the powers of evil. Then a choir of earthlings started chanting, "Deliver them." Then the preacher told them to wait for the morning trumpet to sound on the day of deliverance, and that this will be a sign that the battle is ended and the victory won. As for the rest of the evening, Milo did the same subbing that he had done the previous Friday. One volunteer asked Milo if he was Middle Eastern. Milo explained, of course, that he was Italian. Unfortunately, Milo never got any time with Amira. On one occasion, Milo offered to help Amira clean up a mess a child made, but she did not need the help. Before the shift ended, Milo noticed that Amira was scheduled to work the rides on Saturday, and considered taking Sylvester to the zoo for his communion present that Saturday, which was coming up. When it came to school for the next weeks, things were not as bad. Milo worked 2 more times. That first evening was pretty boring, and Milo wondered if he had what he had gotten himself up to, and wondered if it was worth it. Luckily, this would be over all pretty soon. On the final occasion, Milo was working dressed up as a ghost. During the evening, Milo saw Doris and Merle along with their other friend. Doris gave Milo a big hug after not seeing him for so long. Merle brought up Milo asking Steve how he and Saul met years back at Seawoodin. No, this is on my way to Seawoodin. As it was, Sylvester did make his communion one Saturday later. After Sylvester's communion party, it began to rain, and Milo could not take him to the zoo. That evening, Milo was in such a foul mood about what had happened, and resented this stupid weather change. During the evening, Salvatore took Milo and Matt to Taco Bell for dinner. During the ride to Taco Bell, Salvatore kept blasting rap and told Milo that he had ethnic music. That whole night, Salvatore started acting like a big jerk, and Milo was getting suspicious that he had been fraternizing with malicious entities. Now mind you, Milo was just cranky about the whole situation with Salvatore, and that he was just cranky about not getting to take Sylvester to see Amira at the zoo. The next day, Milo was stuck doing homework at a football game at Uncle Mike's. On a couple occasions, Salvatore hovered over him while he was visiting. Now, if anything, Milo does not like being hovered over and sharing what he's doing for homework. Life at Gamsoil. Life for the kobolds in Gamsoil was not so bad at first, despite not being in Londinium, Pedmotus, or Lionellum. Gamsoil was located not too far from a river which had a great view of Londinium. Much of the time, the kobolds looked over the river to Londinium and longed for the days of being back in their own land. The kobolds had started to make plans about recreating a better and greater headquarters, and after they were repaired and cleaning the mountain paths again, they remember the days when they fought hard against the troll offsprings and brought forth the way from Londinium to Atlantica. Jameis and Remus had found work in the city and were raising funds quite rapidly. This made the kobolds more optimistic when looking over the great river into Londinium, and after 4 leases would be rebuilding the glorious bridge. Unfortunately, Imogen was not having too much luck finding Taibbi. Petastore constantly devised plans to find out where Taibbi could possibly be, but was having no luck whatsoever. Elrich, on the other hand, had been a bit cynical about finding Taibbi, and had become quite fearful of offending the Gamsoil residents, and always advised avoiding asking for help if possible. The Gamsoil Inn has the policy which dictates the residents at the inn are required to vacate the property for at least 3 weeks every month. The kobolds had snuck off back to Londinium and to assess the headquarter damage. The kobolds had noticed the damage had gone significantly worse and could not wait to raise up enough money to get this place fixed and get out of Gam soiled. The kobolds also came across Rivka. Now she had been distraught, as Harmony had been kidnapped by hooded figures and taken through the mountain paths into Atlantis. Harmony luckily did have a clock to tell her where her family was and their state. Eohana's hand had revealed to be traveling through the desert and in danger. Harmony's hand was stated to be in Thatchery and stuck on the streets. The kobold offered to help, but Rivka explained that Harmony could not be hurt, as she was placed under an enchantment to protect her, and how Thatchery was a very indifferent city that would just ignore street toddlers, according to the Londinium magistrates. Plus, Harmony had Parthenian blood, and they are a misdemeanor with natural born surviving instincts. Yet being away from Harmony greatly made Rivka distraught, and she felt so lonely without either her or Johannes. Milo's first fall. School was getting slightly more tolerable for Milo, as he found he was learning something. The teacher he had for drafting, Mr. Schwanman, was a decent guy who was a fair grader, even if he was a bit rough around the edges, and not so understanding about people who have jobs while in school. Still, math had been a bit difficult for Milo, and Mrs. DeVille was helpful at first. Now, Mrs. DeVille never truly came off as a friendly woman, and for all intents and purposes had barely any personality at all. Milo still recognized the perpetual cold that this teacher seemed to have. When it came to school, Milo was getting to know Mark and Phil better. On one occasion, Milo ended up over by Duddlecip. Milo and Ray were working on a project and needed to stop at a hardware store to pick up some supplies. Milo had many flashbacks to 4th grade during this time, and had some very myopic memories of these days. Now Milo did miss having the social life he did with Cider-Pond, but had some hope of learning something, and then being able to move on with his life. On one long weekend, Milo watched the Rugrats Santa Experience episode, which he remembered watching 9 holidays ago on a frequent basis one Friday night. Now this was the same episode where the where the family gets a cabin up in the mountains for Christmas. Otherwise, this gave Milo some flashbacks to the Christmases and started getting him thinking about the day that... started getting Milo thinking about what happened that day that Kazim and Zaida first took Amira home from the hospital when she was born. And he thought that maybe they did watch The Simpsons. On Saturday morning, Milo and Salvatore went out for donuts. During the weekend, Salvatore was being himself again. Then they went over to some Latino store, which seemed to remind Milo of being in 5th grade. As for why, we don't really know. On Sunday, there was a Beauty and the Beast Broadway performance at Ciderpond, which Milo went to with Margaret, Lydia, Eustace, Samantha, and Sylvester. Milo tried getting Sylvester to get his picture with the belle actress. This actress had actually been in chorus class with Amira. Sylvester was on to Milo, and after the play, Grandpa Tony, Uncle Leo, and Aunt Jane came over for dinner for pizza. On Monday, Milo found some pictures of Amira on her friend Heather's MySpace. Then for dinner, Milo made a Middle Eastern lamb dish. After seeing the pictures of Amira, Heather, and Allison, Milo started becoming a bit nostalgic for his days back at Ciderpond and his graduation. Milo had the song Fire and Rain constantly stuck in his head, and how he had seen Amira sing at the baccalaureate and seeing her before the graduation ceremony. Before Thanksgiving, there was a bomb threat at Naltech, and class got out a little early. Now Milo was not too bummed out over this, as he got an afternoon off to do more research on some paranormal investigations. Milo started to believe that he was on to something, but just needed some more time. Now the threat was only a false alarm. As for Thanksgiving break, Milo found that he could still be a bit moody. Without the social life he had at Ciderpond, he oftentimes felt frustrated and felt like he was back in 6th grade again. Otherwise, Milo was a bit annoyed that Matt didn't take the time to spend with them, even though he said he would go to Chinese with them on Friday. Aham Kara's third-born, Propetus, hatched from a silver egg. As we remember, Aham Kara is a Satyasha matriarch whom Melendil helped in counseling her offspring Voltirion and Skeeter. This time around, Skeeter and Propetus were fighting. Propetus was a very dutiful type who strongly values adherence to external standards, while Skeeter is one to be more intuitive and passion-oriented. Skeeter and Propetus were always fighting, and over who Voltirion would be working for. Unfortunately, Melendil did not have a lot of time to be working with Aham Kara or her offspring, as he had been quite busy with the battle and working with Oscar. As it was, things never got better between the two, and they were relentlessly fighting. Propetus and Skeeter were always trying to manipulate Voltirion to take sides with one over the other. Skeeter could get quite fired up if Voltirion took Propetus' side, and they would all start fighting again. The biggest thing Skeeter had hated about Propetus was the way he placed so much emphasis on duty, and had been very pessimistic about pleasure and gratification. The kobold's reprimand. After returning from their labors one afternoon, The kobolds were called down to Emersina's office. She found out that the kobolds went to Londinium, but they had not known that there would be consequences for going to the city. Emersina showed them in the rune print on the contract and explained that Londinium was strictly off limits. Then Emersina warned the kobolds that if they ever did such a thing again, that their wage would be raised so high. This would put the kobolds off schedule and have to stay at the inn longer. Elrich became quite disheartened about this, while Remus started cursing out Emersina. Remus referred to Emersina as a pile of Merludico dung, and had no business telling them that they could not go back to their home town to visit. Zadok, on the other hand, was a bit suspicious and could not understand why Emersina would care about whether her tenants went to Londinium. Zadok started developing theories that Emersina and Troma were the ones behind the attack on the headquarters, and the ones to send the raptors. Imogen reminded Zadok and the kobolds that their job was to find Taibbi, and it would not be wise to entertain certain accusations. Baltic gets worse. By this time, the holiday season was beginning. One afternoon, Milo, Ray, Uncle Leo, Eustace, and Sylvester went to a basketball game at Whelan College. Milo saw a former cheerleader, Ashley, from Cider Pond, and the Whelan cheer squad. Yes, Ashley attended Whelan for college. That evening at dinner past Phyllisville, the Biancatellos went out to dinner with the Filentinos and Uncle Leo's family. At dinner, Milo's cousin Charlotte waited on the table. As we remember, Charlotte is a Williamson, and this place was located in her suburb. That weekend in church, St. Timothy's used the Mass of Light for the first time. The cantor at Mass was Martin's daughter, Kara. Martin was the man who asked Milo to serve in the novena 2 years ago. On Tuesday, Milo found out that Uncle Giorgio had been diagnosed with a cancer, but a treatable cancer. Rob came over for dinner as he wanted to talk to Ray about the whole thing. That night, Milo started having flashbacks to Disney World and thoughts about how this wasn't even going on then. Otherwise, Grandpa Tony was not too worried and trusted that the treatment systems had been very advanced. Math class was unfortunately getting more difficult for Milo. Now, Milo had never taken an algebra class in high school and did not even know the language of numbers to be proficient. He had a rudimentary understanding of numbers. Milo had been proficient in basic functions, including addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Plus, Milo could understand geometry just fine. When Milo started having a hard time with algebra, Ray assumed that Milo was just having a lazy attitude about math and just wanted to get the work over with. This judgmental attitude thoroughly annoyed Milo, as this simply was just not true. Plus, Milo did not like Ray changing his approach or sudden judgmentalism. On Sunday, at a game at Uncle Mike's, while practicing algebra, Ray kept constantly checking up on Milo, and got mad at him when he could not seem to progress in any way. This checking up came about so often. Every time Ray got up, Milo would just get really pissed off and just wanted him to just sit the down. Otherwise, Emma found it quite humorous that the teacher DeVille placed her name on the paper. On Monday night, after practicing so much algebra, Milo needed a break and watched some Mary Poppins on television to refresh his mind. When Ray got home and found out, he just blatantly turned the TV off while he was watching. Milo was not gonna stand for this, and after Ray left, he put the show back on. Ray got real mad at him and accused him of acting like a child. Milo got pretty pissed off and was sick of Ray being such a jerk about how difficult math was for him. Now Margaret admitted to Milo that Ray was being very impatient, and he should not expect him just to get the subject so quickly when having never taken the subject himself. Not to mention, she understood that Milo needed some break. He just could not be working all night. Then, one Friday, Milo had a very difficult time with a math test, and DeVille had been quite impatient with him. This teacher kicked him out of the classroom and had him come back after school to complete the test. Then DeVille started acting like a massive jerk after the school when he was trying to finish the test and was in the background huffing with annoyance. Now this teacher was not good with teaching students who learn better with visual stimulus. Plus the class never covered the basics and just threw these arbitrary abstraction equations at the students. Then after DeVille wanted to leave, she sent Milo off when he could not finish the test with her time frame. After school, Milo went over to Palestrina's market to clear his head. That weekend, the Biancatillos went out to get their Christmas tree and stopped at the same restaurant Uncle Ottavio insisted on after returning from Drake's Forest 3 summers ago. This was also Amira's birthday, and Milo watched The Little Mermaid. That evening, Grandma Pearl, Aunt Mary, and some of the Williamsons, including Elaine and her husband Rich, and Ralph and Peg, came over for dinner. Ray made a nice Italian dinner of sauce, spaghetti, and some meats like pork and braciole and meatballs. Uncle John, unfortunately, was not able to come over as he had quite a nasty case of pneumonia. That Monday in school, DeVille blatantly accused Milo of not being loyal to the school and told him to stop doing things his way. After this was because Milo did not do so well on the test. Milo then started to dislike school and did not appreciate DeVille making such blatant accusations without understanding that math is very difficult for him, or her stupid huffing sounds when students have difficulties. Milo had not experienced this kind of schooling before and always got by with common decency. Never had Milo been treated so rudely by a teacher over academic matters, or accused of his difficulties being his own fault. Milo's only interest in school was to learn the subject, and felt that teacher had no business stepping over such boundaries outside of math. Not to mention, did Milo feel like this teacher was close enough to be stepping on the boundaries to begin with, or demanding that he be loyal to a school that he is there just to learn, not give loyalty and allegiance to. The Jinns meeting. After what happened in school, Melendel summoned a meeting with Herb, Margaret, Myriad, Bilius, Dogmatius, and Alexander. Bilius started ranting, referring to DeVille as a self-righteous asshole with no business making such judgments. Herb admitted that this was quite a difficult matter and was not sure this could be easily resolved. Herb started telling how history is repeating itself just like it had 7 years ago. Herb recounted how Milo wanted to go to Disney World 7 years ago, and his wish finally came true this past summer. Bilius then asked what this has to do with that fuck DeVille. There, I said it. Melendel implores Bilius to watch his language. Herb made his point so many years ago, and things work out themselves without the need for too much intervention. Herb explained that this time around such a prospect may not be so feasible. Melendel asked Myriad for input. Myriad explained that she cannot find a way to possibly work with this school. Myriad explained how the school has been too structured of an agenda to even be used for beneficial purposes. Margaret then gives her input. Margaret explained that the school has a spell from the Maludicos, and there is no known way to use the spell. Bilius protested that Margaret is a magician and should know this. Margaret explained that the school had been set up in a way that has a specific agenda to mold students to become submissive workers. After Bilius calms down, he asks what to do with DeVille and her nasty demeanor. Melendel explains that DeVille has prided herself in being such a good teacher, and if a student has a hard time in her class, she resorts to blaming the students. Bilius retorts that this is garbage. Melendel agrees with Bilius, but explains that he only has to suffer under his teaching a little while longer. After some discussion, the Jinns agree that Milo will have to finish his education at the tech school, but will have to get more learning at the university. Bilius shouted with great excitement over this, a great yes! Bilius cheered on about how this college will put those creeps at the school in their place once they no longer can keep their grubby tentacles on the students. Herb then expressed concern that the charge could get hold of the Chronos if he starts to anticipate a glorious future in college. Herb explained that futuristic ideas always have required sacrifice of living in the present for some never-arriving future. Melendel explained that this was true and confessed that he was seeing this taking effect so far. Melendel explained how, for the first time in life, Milo was anticipating the end of his education before school even began. Melendel addressed Herb and his references to Disney World. Dogmatius argues that it can be hard to be living in the present when the future seems so blatantly unknown and this present is so utterly unbearable. Melendel considers Dogmatius's points, as in times past, any time Milo and Mira were separated, there was always a foreseeable light at the end of the tunnel. Dogmatius explains that Milo will demand a light at the end of the tunnel, and will want definitive proof that there will be one. Melendel agrees that this is true, but the light is not so predictable, and reminded them that the light surprised them the first time, after the funeral. The holiday season. By this time, the holiday break was near. Milo was happy to be getting away from Maltech, as he felt the school had become too judgy and arrogant. Milo found out some bad news that his friend Phil would not be returning to Maltech, as he was not able to handle DeVille's math and had some back problems. Frankly, it had been quite common for students to quit, thanks to DeVille's self-righteous style of teaching. Before Christmas, Milo went to a sight-upon holiday concert, but did not find Amira. Milo had asked Christina via private message if Amira was at the concert. Christina confirmed that Amira was at the concert. As to why Milo did not see her, this had been unknown. On the first night, after school let out, Milo, Ray, and Margaret went to dinner at a pub they ate at 2 Christmases ago. Milo started having some flashbacks to that holiday, which was before he used his Silenzo alibi with Amira. Otherwise, Milo kept thinking about this song, Wood of the Cradle, and how that holiday season 2 years ago seemed so empty without Amira, and now this year just seemed almost even more empty without Amira. On Sunday, Milo and Ray went to a Chicago Bears game that was playing in New Seneca. This had been quite a snowy game, and not so comfortable. During the whole game, they kept mentioning that place called San Fratello's Restaurant. On the way home, Ray and Milo went through New Seneca, which seemed like a more interesting place, and envied the suburb for not being so close to Newsenberg. Milo then started thinking about when he was last time at Aunt Marie's and her talking about Alicia starting college at a Catholic school in Akron in the fall. Milo started reminiscing about when the O'Malleys first moved to New Seneca, and how he visited them the first time when he was only 3 years old. Otherwise, this had been quite a peaceful holiday for Milo, as he was still away from school for a little over a week. On Christmas night, Milo watched Shrek the Third, and started talking more about his planned trip to Disney World. Lydia had been a bit skeptical about this great plan, and Margaret wondered if this would even be possible. All Milo knew was that he had to have something to hope in while stuck in this place like Maltech. One evening after Christmas, Salvatore got into quite a bossy mood. Salvatore had gotten even more uptight about properly closing doors on his precious car, and quite rigid about keeping schedules. Otherwise, Salvatore tried to act like he was in charge of everything. He'd been doing this for a while now. Then in the evening, Salvatore tried taking charge again. Now, the next day, Matt left to go skiing with some friends from New Seneca. Milo talked to Matt, and he was invited to go along. Ray churlishly interjected that Milo it was rude to invite yourself into other activities with Matt's friends. Milo told Ray, "Screw you," after giving him this snippy lecture, especially when he only got to see Matt for so little. That night at church, a concert hosted by Jorge, Aunt Michelle asked Milo if Salvatore could be pushy, but decided not to say no as not to offend her. But this got Milo thinking that maybe Aunt Michelle was on to something. The Rakshasajinns' preservation. Dogmatius is searching the hall of Akashic prophecies and finds a vision of a family that is driving home from church on Christmas Eve. They are listening to the song Feliz Navidad and decide to stop at a stress clinic. They walk in the clinic to find an elderly woman in a wheelchair whose face has rot away. Dogmatius finds that this is addressed to the charge and shows this to the mortals on earth. Melendel quickly found out what happened when the nightmare became quite prominent throughout the land the night before New Year's Eve. Melendel asked the watchman what he knew, and he admitted that he had not been around to see this, but knew this had not been the work of Rakshasajinns. The watchman had enchantments that can detect Rakshasajinns coming into the hall, as he knew when the occult offspring raided the halls in ages past. Melendel never mentioned this, and Dogmatius never mentioned this, and considered that this had to be done. According to Dogmatius, the world needed to know what was going to happen so they could know how to fight the monster. Dogmatius did confide in Uriyama over what he knew of the vision. Uriyama looked over what he saw and explained that the mortals had no ability to stop this horrible ending from coming, which he explained to occur in exactly 2 years. Dogmatius became utterly horrified at the prospect and begged Uriyama for some help. Uriyama explained that the only thing that really changed was the knowledge of getting out was going to bring an end to the anniversary in a different way. Uriyama explained that this was going to kickstart very soon. The third anniversary. Before returning to Maltec, Milo had plenty of nightmares. On New Year's Eve, Milo went to McDonald's with the Flentinos. After lunch, they went to the grocery store to pick up some food for New Year's Eve dinner. At the store, Milo saw Kazim shopping for saucers. Then Milo came across his 11th grade Spanish teacher. Now Milo talked to her for a little bit and told the teacher that he was at Maltec and his plans for New Year's Eve, which were none. Then that evening, Milo came across the trashy Steve Wilkos show for the first time, and was repulsed at the way he exploited abused victims for the sake of entertainment. This was one of those shows that only exist to cater to people who suffered abuse. and enjoy abusers getting yelled at without ever helping victims. That same evening after dinner, Milo had to do some algebra practices, which he had found utterly unenjoyable. And knowing that he would be back, and which only reminded him that he would be back in Maltech in 2 more days. After practicing and finally understanding the material, Milo started to anticipate returning to Disney World once he got out of Maltech, and to bring Amira along to his trip. Milo was in a quite depressed state and only dreaded a dark and sterile future. To anticipate the future, Milo watched a Simpsons episode known as Kiss Kiss Bang Bangalore. This was the episode from 2 Palm Sundays ago, before the Rumcorns moved. On New Year's, after the Biancatellis went to church, Grandma Pearl came over so Margaret could drop her off at the airport so she could leave for Orlando for a cruise with the Rumcorns and Uncle Doug. Now Milo had been utterly envious over this. Otherwise, that night after they had seen the movie Waterhorse in the theaters, returning to school was no fun for Milo, as even his drafting class was getting rough. Milo started to dislike this VII even more, who also became his introduction to computer teacher. The original teacher was only subbing, and had been a retired instructor, who had worked with Grandpa Tony years back before Maltech. Not to mention, Milo was still quite envious of the college students who had longer and more decent breaks. On one evening, Milo went out to dinner with some friends from high school at a restaurant bar. The next day, DeVille told Milo in front of the whole class that she had been disappointed him for going out partying on a school night, and that he needs to get his priorities straight. Milo was pretty pissed, as he had gotten some faulty information, considering that he had only been out for dinner that night, and not her business to begin with. Milo told DeVille that he was not even drinking that night, and that she should not be making accusations before getting the facts correct. What happened was that a secretary thought that she saw Milo out drinking and gave DeVille the wrong information. Now Milo knew that even if he was out partying, that it was none of that stupid-ass teacher's business to stick a big fat nose in. That weekend, Milo, Ray, Uncle Leo, and Eustace went to a Wheeling basketball game. Eustace mentioned that Milo was still had a MySpace picture of a redneck, and having never deleted a comment that Salvatore left, referring to Uncle Wayne's boss as Chad McLeasel. No, Milo referred to the picture of the redneck as Uncle Wayne's boss, Chad McLeasel. Milo told Eustace that this was a joke, written when the Rumcorns ruined fried dough night, all because of a stupid job. Eustace told Milo that he was selfish. Milo did not take too well to this, and Eustace explained that a secular society revolves around money. That's all there is to it, and sacrifices need to be made. Milo had no interest in hearing from some freshman brat telling him that he needs to conform to a morally incompetent system centering on profits. On Sunday, Milo and Margaret went down to the library. Yeah, that's all that happened. Then Milo found out at the game at Uncle Mike's that Alicia was heading back to college also. On Tuesday, the 3rd anniversary of Dancing Day arrived, and he wrote a letter of recommendations for specific hymns for the upcoming Lenten Easter. This on the anniversary of Dancing Day. St. Timothy's held a Mass event that would go through all the parts of the Mass and give an explanation to what it all meant. After Mass, Milo put a letter of hymn recommendations on the church organ. The recommendations had been for the community Mass over Lent and the hymn "This is the Feast of Victory" over Easter. Milo had been thinking even more extensively about the 4th grade. During this time, Milo started having flashbacks to seeing Amira at Doodle-Kip so many years ago, and this 3-year anniversary of Dancing Day. After church, Milo listened to the songs that he downloaded on the first Dancing Day, which included "Gather Us In," "Illis Nay," "The Canticle of the Sun," and "This is the Feast of Victory for our God." Milo had quite an experience after listening to "This is the Feast of Victory" while looking at the pictures of Amira on Heather's MySpace. Then there was an abhorrent vision of Revelation 5, consisting of a cartoonish lion, folded hands, and a lamb with 7 literal horns and 7 literal eyes. Milo remembered well reading this passage in the Bible 3 years ago while listening to the hymn, before he found out about him and Amira at Doodle-Kip so long ago. The next day, Milo, Ray, Lydia, Grandpa Tony, and the 3 of them went to Chick-fil-A for dinner. While at the restaurant, Milo saw his 2nd through 3rd grade principal. This was the principal Milo had asked if Magruder really got fired. Milo had not seen the principal when he was visiting here. Milo had not seen the principal last since he was visiting Hazelwood Forest back in 4th grade. After dinner, Milo came across a documentary called The Helen Bat by a supposed near-death experience expert Maurice Rawlings. Now Milo had been quite desperate for some confirmation of a reality beyond the mere confines of the natural world, and feared that all his intuitions of demonic activity meant some psychiatric disorder and could not handle reality. This was way more than Milo bargained for. Milo could not believe that anyone could actually adhere to such awful beliefs, and was nothing he grew up learning in church. This documentary was presented the same fundamentalist propaganda as "accept Jesus Christ as your personal savior or burn in hell." Milo had heard before in church that this was definitely possible for people of other religions or denominations to go to heaven, so why was this one saying anything differently? Then a Meludico, known as Eudopus, and an Epitanitus known as Concus appeared to Milo, making some offers. Concus had taken the form of a red balloon. Concus offered Milo a quick solution to all his problems. Conquest explained to Milo that he could take his trials away. Milo knew that life as he knew it was coming to an end, and his connection to Cyberpunk School District was quickly slipping away. Conquest promised Milo that the second he leaves the doors of Maltech, all his problems will be immediately fixed. Then Conquest offered Milo some new devotion to the slain lamb, who could quickly cleanse him from his stains and shame of being a Maltech student and raise him above the trials reserved for those of the trash class. Eudopus then offered Milo compassion and affirmation. Eudopus started telling Milo how people had treated him so awful in these last few months, and how they were such horrible people full of selfish motives. Eudopus then shows Milo a lamb known as mercy upon the poor, victims of unjust powers, an alliance to show vengeance to the ugly oppressors. Milo immediately accepted the offer, much to his future detriment. On Thursday afternoon, after getting out of Maltech, Milo took a walk down to Hazelnut Forest. Milo had been a bit Cyberpunk School sick and missed the district. Milo had also wanted to go back and further reminisce about his fourth-year grade at Hazelnut Forest. When Milo got into the school, he came across Mrs. Signotto. Now Sylvester had Mrs. Signotto for science class. Milo then came across Mrs. Watson. Mrs. Watson recognized Milo immediately, and she was quite thrilled to see him. Mrs. Watson took Milo around to see some other teachers who may have remembered him, including a second grade teacher and a fourth grade teacher. Mrs. Watson explained to Milo that it was true that Mrs. Romero had passed away the year before. On Friday night, Milo caught bits and pieces of a documentary on Fatima. Now Milo started to confirm that there was something beyond what these ideas of like the mere reductionism of psychiatry. On Saturday afternoon, Milo had Gianni over to watch the Simpsons movie. Now, something about the movie kind of perturbed Milo, especially the scene where Grandpa Abe makes some religious prediction of what is to come with the EPA and trying to blow up Springfield. That night, after dinner, Milo watched the movie Ants for the first time in several years, not since he was in 4th grade. Milo remembered how he loved the movie back when he was 10, and before going to Doodle Kip. Watching the movie made Milo feel like he was back in 4th grade, and remembered how it felt before seeing the movie for the first time in so long. Otherwise, the movie reminded Milo of his current circumstances with Maltech and the authorities in general. Melendel and Dogmatius' dispute. Melendel figured out what Dogmatius had done with the orb at the Hall of Akashic Prophecies and strongly disapproved. Dogmatius explains that the charge needed some security, and Melendel explained that this kind of security is a very dangerous path, but that he already spoke with Uriyama over this. Melendel explained that showing the child his vision had tempted him to looking for some solution to make it so this horrible vision would not have to come to pass. Then Melendel summoned Alexander, Vesta, and Victoria for their expertise on the matter in question. Vesta had seen what happened with Eudopus and knew well that he can easily put a facade of gentleness and compassion that other Meludicos cannot succeed at doing, and promises revenge for all those who acted in such a harsh and oppressive fashion. Vesta suggested that Eudopus was only given the charge what he needed, knowing full well that he had been subjected to other ruthlessness, but in a very poor way. Victoria remembered Conquest from his early days as a third anagrammatron. She remembered how Conquest was always trying to get rid of his burden while passing them on to others. Conquest was not one to sacrifice whatsoever, and always sought to cast them on those who he did not like. Melendel then acknowledged that what happened is over and considered Dogmatius's help to move on. The finding of Taibi. Back in Gam soil, Irigen found Taibi, who was in a group with 3 Gallicanians, Jaden, Fabinius, and Hannah, and a kobold, Natalia, from a Parthenian town known as Catalanium. According to their story, they were attending a boarding school in Gallicanium. Jaden explained that Taibi was from a land known as Hamataria, and had been taken into their school residency known as Luxorian Heights. The caretaker of the house is Severus, who had been obsessed with all things from Hamataria. Natalia suspected that Severus only rescued Taibi from his master in order to interrogate him for more information on Hamataria. Hannah knew that Severus was pretty high up on the Gallicanian courts, and feared that he was looking for some source of power in Hamataria. There had been a wide belief in Gam soil that Hamataria contained some secret wisdom not known in Gallicanium. Natalia explained that her grandmother had given her a locket from Hamataria to find some lost relics of the vanishing goblet. Natalia's grandmother had the locket and put her on the task to find the relics and keep them safe from the evil one in the city. Now Natalia's grandmother had a sixth sense to be able to detect danger, and knew that someone horrible was after the pieces. Natalia's grandmother also told her that she was chosen to open the path between Hitaria and Hamataria. After Natalia had been sent to this Gam-soiled school, she had a run-in with Jaden. Jaden's friend Tisha, originally from a nomadic Shemitarian tribe, had mysteriously disappeared, and Natalia had just appeared at the school out of nowhere. One night, Jaden did a hazing ritual and locked Natalia in an attic, hoping to interrogate her about the disappearance of Tisha. While in the attic, Natalia came across a relic of a vanishing goblet. Natalia confides with Fabinius but does not want to tell anyone else in Luxorian Heights. At one point, Hannah, who becomes Natalia's roomie, becomes suspicious of her and wants to keep tabs on her. When Hannah confronts Natalia over this, she explains her quest. Fabinius was not too happy about this, but understood that Natalia did not have much choice, lest Hannah should blab to other people. Meanwhile, Jaden had come across some papers Severus dropped, which had pictures of the locket that Natalia was wearing. According to these papers, Tisha had a destiny to fulfill, which could only be fulfilled if these relics were found. Jaden interrogated Natalia over this, and she explained that had been a task given to her by her grandmother. Now, eventually, Jaden grew to trust Natalia could help her find the relics and hopefully find out what Severus was really up to. Taibbi, who could only speak in broken Hatarian, spoke of the raptors having carried off their friends, and his former master was behind this. All Taibbi really could recount was that this was a greedy merchant making deals with game soiled. Taibbi then said that he wanted to return to Hamataria, which was close to where the kidnapped kobolds were going to be taken. The kobolds then offered to help the students find the lost relics and help translate the ruined clues written on the relics. End of the semester. A few weeks later, on Super Bowl weekend, Milo had just a rough week of school. Due to the bomb threat from November, the students were required to make up the hours and stay 2 extra hours. By this time, Milo had all his drafting work done, but still needed some help on his algebra homework. Milo had been stuck on some homework on quadratics, and really did not understand them one bit. For dinner, Milo and Ray went to Connor Finnegan's before the Wheeling basketball game. Now Milo remembered going to that restaurant 2 years ago for that post St. Patrick's Day luncheon. The next day, there was a late start at Maltec due to a snowstorm. Milo knew that he would have another day to make up over for 2 more hours, and ranted about not wanting to go another long day at a dump. Ray got mad at Milo for calling Maltec a dump. At school, Mr. Schwanman was even becoming grouchier, as Milo's class was full of obnoxious goof-offs. One day, Mr. Schwanman threatened to give the class a test after some immature student aggravated a substitute. Not that Schwanman even went on even kept his threat. On Friday after school, Margaret admitted that the school was hard for Milo, considering that the clientele at the school could be a bit of a rough bunch. Now Milo never had much interaction with disadvantaged cultures, as he went to a middle-class schools in Sight Upon School District. In these schools, manners had higher priority, where at places like Maltec, manners were not given high priority. That night, Milo watched The Prince of Egypt for the first time in 6 years. As for the movie, Milo got pretty attached and started getting some pretty revolutionary ideas from the movie. As we remember, Milo always saw Moses as quite a hero in the Bible, who stood up to tyrants and let them have their just deserts. On Saturday night, Milo went to the Flint Mill for dinner. After dinner, Milo and Sal told us some old SpongeBob episodes. Now, Milo had not watched too much TV for the last few years, but did seem to watch a lot of movies and read books. It seemed to be reverting to this habit due to depression about being at Maltech and trying to escape this boring existence. On Sunday night, Uncle Mike held the Super Bowl party as the Bears were in the Super Bowl. The whole family attended, including Aunt Marie and Alicia. Now, Alicia was visiting a friend who was currently attending Wheeling College. During that night, Milo became, in his head, more insistent that he had to be going to continue his education. Milo felt he was not getting a good education with Maltech and wanted to get out of this lifestyle the school was promoting, this time for good, and never return to it. Now Ray was still not too keen on Milo's thought, thinking about continuing his education and think he should have just looked for a job first. That last week for school, for Milo, school had been extremely stressful. Milo had a math final to study for and feared having to repeat algebra. This was despite having gotten passing grades on all his last few tests, usually a B or a C. Milo had feared not graduating on time and being stuck at Maltech for another semester. On Ash Wednesday, Milo, Ray, Lydia and Rob all went to church, as Uncle Georgia was in Akron for treatments. Now these treatments were going pretty well. As for church, Milo was all out of sorts and could not even concentrate on the new observances, and was just all worried about school. That Thursday, Milo's first semester of Maltech finally ended. The last day consisted of the fourth semester giving a presentation where the class designed a tech school. Of all projects, really. Milo thought this was a pretty bland project, but frankly did not care, as he had not planned on making any fond memories of this school, and just wanted to get out. Before the presentation, Schwanman said that he wanted the class all his students to ask at least one good question, or he would fail them, or he would deduct points from their grade, and said ignorant questions would be an automatic failure. That week after, Milo was off. On Milo's first day off, he came across a show known as Tailspin. Milo remembered the television show and the elevator episode that reminded him of the mall at New Seneca. Plus, Milo remembered seeing the DVD right before visiting Maltech, back when he was a senior in high school. That evening, Milo then watched the Drake and Josh movie. This was the movie where Drake and Josh got stuck in a heist in San Diego after sending Megan on the wrong flight. As for that week, nothing special happened. Milo was just happy to be away from Maltech. Milo was also relieved to find out that he passed all his classes and had none to repeat. Think especially algebra. Otherwise, Milo had some dreams one night about going to a party at the Caras. Then Milo woke up, all disappointed. On Saturday night, the Biancatellis went out to dinner at a restaurant not too far from Dudokip with Uncle Leo's family. On Wednesday, Milo had another meeting at Richard Esposito's after being off since before the holiday season. Milo told the group about the Maurice Rawlings video. Richard's wife Amy referred to these videos as creepy and not worth watching. Richard explained that what Milo had seen was something called fundamentalism, and explained that this was a pretty bad approach. This was even the worst approach to religion. Richard explained that fundamentalists were biblical literalists, and how many of these literalistic hellfire teachings and assumptions of heaven with only evangelical Christians were based on poor understandings of the original context of the Bible, usually based on a whole born-again particular verse, selective. On Thursday morning, Milo went out to donuts with Salvatore. That night, Milo had another dream of a party at the Carras and looking for a mirror. Mirror was nowhere to be found. All Milo remembered was some type of peach dessert. On Friday, Milo started to realize that his vacation was near ending. Ray and Margaret that night went to a comedy club with Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane. That night, Milo had a dream about starting his second semester, which had been identical to his first day at Maltec, but this time stuck on some new dorm tower at the facility. The weekend before returning to school, Milo had not been so pleasant for Milo, as he dreaded returning to the school. Milo started thinking about returning to Disney World again, and watched many YouTube videos of Disney World resorts. This was a new habit for Milo, as anticipating a trip to Disney World was the only way to get through these dreary days at Maltec. Seeing all these videos of cool resorts got Milo very excited, and he could not wait to have this really awesome vacation far, far away from Maltec forever. The kidnapped kobolds. By this time, the raptors had arrived in the strange city with the kidnapped kobolds. The raptors had been flying through the desert, looking for the right place to land. The kidnapped kobolds were taken to a land known as Agrabah. The kobolds had been dropped off in the town and unable to get by. Agrabah had been even worse than Abraham had described. Agrabah had turned into a ruthless and greedy town where the poor and homeless were disregarded and treated terribly. As the kobolds had no property rights in Agrabah or money before being taken away, they had been reduced to theft just to eat. The residents of Agrabah still remained unapologetic and constantly attempted violence against the kobolds for their necessity thievery. The kobolds started to be haunted by flashbacks of the days when they were stuck at the compound, and remembered they had the same pointless life now in Agrabah, and just how helpless they were. The ruthlessness of the town also strongly reminded them of the days when the shadows possessed them, and the similar oppression they experienced under the hands of the angry Maludicos. In order to combat this horrible existence, they retold the stories about the flood that cleansed Londinium, and long hoped for a flood to do the same to this putrid robot. Otherwise, the kobolds remembered the days when they were fought against the mountain offspring trolls and saw the temple. This just made the kobolds long to return to Lionelum festival grounds. The new semester. Within the first weeks, Milo started architectural drafting. The teacher, Mr. Roberta, had been incompetent in the subject and had only worked in architectural drafting for a year as a toady to a guy Ron. All Mr. Roberta knew was what was by the book, and had very specific standards. On the first day, some students asked about working on the computers for projects. Mr. Roberta explained that this was a board school. Frankly, the only reason the school stuck to the boards was to weed out students who were only there because their parents made them attend this place. That afternoon, Milo and Ray saw the list, based on a Stephen King novel of the same name. With school, Milo found that Mr. Roberta was a nitpicky grader, and took points off for imperfections such as new lettering exercises. On that Friday, after the semester started, Salvatore and Gianni went for a hike in the woods behind the Jafari's house. Actually, it was on the Persia Expressway, and then to the Persia Expressway, I should say. That evening, Salvatore and Gianni stayed over for the Biancatellis for some Arby's fish sandwiches as Lent was full swing. That evening, Salvatore hacked into a paranormal MySpace profile Milo had concerning matters of demonic attacks. Salvatore changed the profile picture to a logo, from the logo to a picture of Milo. Milo was pretty annoyed about this, and he was trying to keep a low profile and did not want any friends of his page to know that he was one behind it. Plus, Milo had just befriended Nusha and Roxana and Jasmine. That night, Milo had a depressing dream about seeing the end of Pocahontas and celebrating the Passover holiday with his cousins Kyle and Grandma Pearl and some Williamsons. On Saturday morning, Grandma Pearl called and heard Ray talking in a serious, quite irritated tone. Then Ray explained that Uncle John had passed away from natural causes. Uncle John was not doing too well for a while, which he got when he caught the pneumonia over Christmas and never really recovered. On Tuesday, Milo got a C on an AutoCAD test, and Ray got all mad at Milo over this. Now, Milo had never been particularly good at written tests, and found Ray's anger to be utterly patronizing and repulsively disgusting. Milo had always hated the grading system to begin with, and hated when anyone got on his case about these arbitrary standards like grades. That evening, the Biancatellis went to the funeral home for Uncle John. Milo could not help but remember Grandma Gladys's funeral over 8 years ago. Now Milo, at the funeral, Milo saw some of his Williamson cousins along with Leanne and her husband Jim and some other, and then met other people like Elaine, Aunt Mary, Grandma Pearl, Charlotte, Jennifer and Caitlin, along with who else? Some of Elaine's kids. Now Milo was not sure if he should go to the funeral on Wednesday. Ray and Margaret insisted that he not worry about this, as the service would start while he was still in school. Plus Milo had no transportation as his car was at the shop. Salvatore ended up picking Milo up from Maltech that day. Then the Salvatore took Milo back to Aunt Michelle's house, as he wanted him to show him a video on making rice, and wanted Milo to practice playing chess with Johnny. By this time, Johnny had taken up in the test competitions after losing his opportunity due to the injury the previous year. Milo just wanted to go home and work on his paranormal page, and did not like being forced by Salvatore, thanks to Salvatore making a decision for him. Milo still knew that this was some guilt trip over Gianni that Salvatore was forcing Milo onto him. That evening, Milo, Salvatore, and Lydia went out for dinner. On the way over to dinner at a chili dog hut, both Salvatore and Lydia were giving Milo a hard time about why he would want to get more education when he could get a job. Milo did not want to hear either of their advice, as he wanted nothing to do with Maltech once he got out of that school when the day he graduated. Plus Milo did not want a job that his school placed students in. What Milo did know was that the school recruited people for jobs in Newport News, Virginia. Milo knew that this was really the only company affiliated with Maltech, and Milo did not want to move away from Cytopon, especially somewhere over 80 hours away, and being around Maltech colleagues for the rest of his life. Back at school, Milo was getting more frustrated with his education and more strongly considered college. Once he graduated from school, Roberta proved to be a real asshole about grading. He was very nitpicky about insignificant matters, and had some specific ideas about what he wanted, and expected the students just to be able to figure out what he wanted. Milo found this annoying, as he wanted to learn to school a skill and how to do an actual design, not trying to please some nitpicky buttwork. When it came to math class, Milo had a better time with geometry. The teacher in his class, Mr. Stinson, was the same teacher who substituted the previous semester and got some kids in trouble. Mr. Stinson explained that Mr. Schwarman took his words out of context and did not want to get the students in trouble, or get the idea that he was a bad guy. Now, Mr. Stinson was quicker at teaching, but not the nuisance like DeVille was. Plus, Milo was much better at geometry. Unfortunately, Milo was still stuck with Roberta for AutoCAD class. Frankly, AutoCAD would have been one of the few used for classes Milo had got at that stupid tech school so far. Milo wanted to graduate from Maltech in the worst way possible and kept counting down the days. Milo could not wait for the semester to end, as he knew he would be halfway through the stupid course once that semester ended. All Milo could do this time was type the same calculations of the days already finished at Maltech, divided by the days of Maltech total. Milo had an intuition that if he did not take some charge, he could be stuck in a place like Maltech for the rest of his life. For Milo, this school had been like the stereotypical menial job with that authoritarian and capricious manager where the students work hard, where the workers work hard, yet still barely able to get by. Milo feared that the quality of his education would only qualify students for this kind of bullshit work. Milo could not understand why so many students actually liked this school and were not so standoffish as he was. Frankly, Milo just wanted to learn his skill and leave without any attachment to anybody or anything at this school. Daxividus' vision. During the spring, Daxividus was summoned back to the Akashic Hall of Prophecies to relay a vision of Chuck E. Cheese that he had just shut down, and Pecunia overlooking this. After Daxividus had seen the vision, he did some investigation and found out that Sheepus, Sleazum, Buttcount, and Siren had been working for Pecunia. Daxividus discovered that Pecunia was the one to lead Maltech and was also overseeing institutes of mass food production and chain retail. Further investigation led Daxividus to discover that Sleazum had influence over the highest officers, with Buttcount having influences over the magisterial authorities and instructors, and Sheepus having control over the students and workers. Meanwhile, Siren had been putting on TV show distractions in order to cover up the work of Pecunia with glitz and glamour. Daxividus confided what he saw with Melendel and had further bad news. Melendel explained that he knew that the Siren was putting on a facade. According to Melendel, Siren was creating a spirit of lust in the air and working to make retail and mass food production look appealing, while hiding the ugly reality behind the closed doors. Melendel also explained that Siren had gotten to the charge, and that she was also working with an unknown hypercorno. As to who, Melendel knew not. To make matters worse, the Seer Darnell showed up with Oscar to relay some more bad news. Oscar explained that the eye who was following them was of the Archon Collectivist. Last Melendel knew of Collectivist was that she was in the realm of Capsuda. According to Oscar's account, Collectivist had two offspring known as Pyrrhus and Puterma. According to Demille, Pyrrhus had sent Siren and Sleazum working for him. Oscar explained how Collectivist is a very possessive Archon, who keeps an annoyingly close eye on the mortals, and takes an abnormal interest in their behavior, but does not care about them as people. Darnell explained how Pyrrhus has great influence on social groups, while Paterma has the most influence over parental type relationships such as grandparents, aunts, uncles, mentors, and other authorities such as teachers and bosses. Donnell then explains how Pyrrhus sees friendships as grounded on terms and conditions, where one side is obliged to conform to the other side's wishes, or both sides are obliged to make some stupid compromises. Donnell explains that with Pyrrhus's influence, many have given up on friendship, and those feeling most unempowered. Many have opted for lusty infatuations with fictional characters thanks to Siren. Donnell explains that this Australian television show with 3 teenage mermaids has gotten quite popular amongst many agitated boys who fear getting into a real relationship, and have grown quite fond of the pretty girls on the show. Donnell explains that others who cannot find a friend who supports them no matter what have geared to the show with a blended family and an internet television show both on Nickelodeon. Oscar explains that this phenomenon has already occurred because these shows resemble the friends and family many mortals under Pyrrhus and her term wish they had. Religious experimentation. Around this time, Milo wanted to go to a choral concert at Set Upon High. This was in order to see Amira again. Unfortunately, Milo could not find time at the concert, and ended up becoming frustrated over this. Plus, Milo was still being forced not to go because of schoolwork. Margaret asked Milo why he would want to go to a high school concert. Milo explained that he liked high school and was not happy with Naltec. Margaret explained to Milo that he was not in high school anymore. Now, Milo was never one to like people telling him the obvious when he talks about about his ideals. During Milo's time of difficulty, he had taken more interest in religion. By this time, Holy Week was fast approaching. Much to Milo's disappointment, they had not incorporated the community mass. Milo suspected it to be the work of a couple known as Norberta. Now, Norberta once complained about a kid with a disability giving her a hug after church, and she got all uncomfortable and asked the family not to attend the mass she cancelled it. Milo blamed Norberta as he enjoyed looking down on her. In fact, Milo quite saw her as one big joke. This was considering that Milo had a friend Todd with autism and did not like seeing people with disabilities feared, and he also knew what it felt like to be under petty requests from people like me. Before Easter, Milo got a visit from a Jehovah's Witness. At first, Milo thought this was a visitor from the morgue due to the fancy clothes and the hat. Then Milo put the pieces together as it was near Easter, and these people typically do go door to door. Milo answered as he wanted someone to talk to besides a Maltec teacher. Milo found this witness was Jacob, who invited him to the Last Supper. Milo had accepted Jacob's book from the Watchtower Society, known as What the Bible Really Teaches. By this time, Uncle Giorgio had come home from Akron, as his treatments were completed, and he was ready to come home. By this time, Milo started developing a plan for what he would study in college. and found out that Susawego would accept his credits from Maltech. Milo's plans were to major in art history and take some classes in the humanities, as to gain more right-brain knowledge for actual architectural designs. Milo's ambitions were to become a land developer and have all these plans to fix Phyllisville and Luxembourg. On Good Friday, after church, Milo played a game he invented back in 4th grade known as Steve. This game was basically Uno, but with both players going half the deck. The rules were that whoever suggested playing the game would go first. So this pretty much game was a big joke. On Easter Saturday, Milo and Ray went over to the Phyllisville market, which sold many ethnic products. At this time, Milo was not a big fan of Phyllisville either, as he considered it to be the Luxembourg of the east side of the greater Essex region. As for Easter, Milo had his ups and downs. Milo got pretty angry when he was not doing so well at Mario Kart when playing with Matt and Salvatore. What had happened was, one time Salvatore threw a shell at him, and right when he fell into a big hole and was unable to ever catch up. And then on one occasion, Matt threw a shell at him right when he was about to win. But otherwise, it did not take much to pick Milo off. After coming home from Aunt Julia and Aunt Jane's, Milo went downstairs to do some work on his paranormal MySpace page. Margaret makes Milo leave the downstairs game because Lydia's boyfriend Daquan has come over to visit. Milo was already mad about not having a girlfriend while Lydia had a boyfriend, and then her getting privileges to kick Milo out of the game room when he's using it. Milo was all disgruntled over this, as he was still irritated about not seeing Amira, and did not like any of the few girls that were at Maltech. Plus, on Easter night, Milo became quite angry as Salvatore showed up at the house late at night with Matt and wanted to use his TV to play video games. Milo was just finishing a television show which had been George Lopez, and they told him that he would let them play after the show. Salvatore told Milo that he did not want to watch his stupid show. Milo held the clicker and that he was not going to give it back to them, and became quite possessive of it. Eustace told Milo not to be acting like such a jerk. Salvatore then ran past Milo and ripped the remote right out of his hand. Milo really was not going to take to this and started flipping out about being blatantly disrespectful of their property, that he had no right to barge on his house like this and take stuff out of his hand, and acting like a stupid jock. For the rest of the night, Milo avoided Salvatore. That night, Milo put a drawer in front of his bedroom door so Salvatore could not come in or start taking pictures of him in the morning, or even worse, try to put his hand in warm water. Not that that really even worked in the first place. That night, Milo had some dreams about the movie The Mist. And when Milo woke up, he found that his drawers had been moved around, which he put them up for a reason so Salvatore could not get in. The next day, on the way to lunch, Salvatore blasted rap in the car. which Milo objected to. Salvatore took great offense to Milo's complaints.
My salvation shall not tarry.
When it came to the Easter season, Milo was a bit annoyed that his request for this is the Feast of Victory seemed denied at church. In fact, Milo was a bit annoyed with the first weeks of Easter, as Jorge had to play the keyboard and lead the choir instead of the organ. Due to this, Jorge ended up having to use the piano the whole Mass, much to Milo's annoyance. That afternoon, Milo found out a restaurant known as Ishvatan was opening in Pond. Milo wondered if Amir would be employed at the restaurant. A few weeks later, Jacob returned over to the Biancatellos and brought his friend and fellow witness Vito over. While they were talking, Salvatore and Johnny showed up, and Milo found out that Vito had been an old friend of Uncle Ottavio's. Milo was quite intrigued by the Jehovah's Witnesses at first, and found their beliefs in soul sleep quite strange. Now Milo was always taught that the dead still exist, but are not reanimated at a later time. Otherwise, one day later, Margaret went on another business trip to Tampa. As the night before, Milo had a dream that Lydia had been playing a game and she lost, and her reward was she had to listen to Grandpa Clarence sing the national anthem. That evening, Milo was still having a long day at Maltech. That afternoon, Ray popped into Milo's classroom and he got a bit embarrassed. Milo was not embarrassed that Ray had to... Milo was only embarrassed that Ray had to see the kind of school Milo attended. After school, Milo and Ray booked dinner, as Lydia had been over at Grandma Pearl's, who took her over to Jennifer's so Caitlin could show her some dresses. On Thursday, Vito and Jacob returned. Milo asked them for some advice about finding the right girl and the best career. Being that the witnesses are a futuristic religion, they have a more pessimistic view about the present and have all their hope in the future. When it came to finding a wife, they gave the standard Bible thumper advice, such as making sure that the girl is a believer, aka a Jehovah's Witness. That weekend, Lydia, Ray, and Milo visited Aunt Marie for the last of their annual trips. As for the trip, this had been pretty standard. They went back to a restaurant, that was Uncle Matt's club. On Sunday morning for Mass, they went to the same church Milo remembered going to when he was 3 years old. Otherwise, it looked quite a bit different than Milo remembered it. One Friday later, Milo, Ray, Salvatore, and Eustace ate dinner at the new Iranian restaurant known as Ishvatan. That Saturday, Milo went on a road trip to St. Timothy's to see a Medjugorje top in Toledo, Ohio. One of the members of Richard Esposito's Bible study organized the trip, which would go through a Lord's exhibit and the barn church, where many believed a Marian apparition occurred. Now Milo felt a bit freaked out about how people so strongly believed in this devotion. Finally, the pilgrims arrived at the church in Toledo. When it came to the top, Milo was not overly impressed. Milo had become a bit of a little rationalist these days and had sought out more exact answers compared to the previous year. When it came to the devotion, Milo felt like this was a bit much and had a hard time believing this was the absolute truth. The night after getting back, Milo had a dream about that he saw Sean and his friends Sean and Steve at the church, both behind an organ. And then he had the dream that Jacob and Vito left Milo's house when he found out that Milo was Catholic. Before they left and gave up on their studies, Vito, Anne and Jacob talked about what they would be getting for dinner. That morning, there was a great vision above the Biancatelli's house of a time when the accuser is wreaking havoc on the earth and causing an uproar through the nations. Then the mighty king, in the form of a slain lamb, appears, and the accuser's throne dissolves into dust and falls to the earth. At the Lamb's word, the day of salvation has begun, and the day of the rightful king was at hand. The earth had been restored, and the wolf and the sheep no longer fought, and the calf and the lion laid on the holy mountain. Milo over these days had been more receptive to Jacob and Vito's visit, as he had been in a state of anxiety and restlessness over his current circumstances. For Milo, at this time, he could not tolerate ambiguity in any form. In the past, nothing had ever been so bad that he had become so fearful and depressed. The teachings of the witnesses gave Milo a sense of certainty that there was more to life than mere survival, that spiritual warfare is really real, and that there would be a restoration par Isaiah 11 of a paradise earth, where everything he feared Maltech represented would be utterly destroyed. Milo had also liked their other teachings on the resurrection, where people were given a fair chance to learn, as opposed to the mindless literalist ideas that those who are not identified as Christians before death are doomed to roast in the afterlife. In fact, Milo felt more convinced that what the Bible said than these Medjugorje testimonies. Milo was becoming more moody with Maltech, as he had gotten into more difficult material, and Roberta was becoming more and more unhelpful. What happened was Roberta had not really liked that Milo was considering furthering his education after Maltech, and gave smart answers every time Milo asked a question or help on projects. At this time, such as when Milo asked why they point north on the elevation drawing, and he says the point north. At this time, an incompetent math teacher known as Mr. Toomer came out of retirement, and Milo's class got stuck with him. Now, Milo was now more irritated as he would no longer have Mr. Stinson. What had happened originally was Mr. Toomer was out of Maltech after slipping on a pen and breaking his coccyx. Now this teacher was a real jerk, who had temper tantrums at students if they had some difficulty. In fact, rumors spread that he would pitch fights with students after class. One Sunday, the Biancatellis dropped Lydia off at a tournament for school. Amira was also in. On Tuesday, Milo was pretty keen to pick Lydia up. However, Ray would not let him do so, and only let Milo come along. Milo boomed out of the car to find Lydia and hoped that he would see Amira. Ray shouted for Milo to get back. Milo ignored this and looked for Lydia. Ray then asked Milo if this was any different from looking for at forbidden fruit. Milo said it was better than having these assholes at Maltech. Lydia mentioned that Amira sounded a lot like Alicia. Daxivadis' vision. Around this time, Daxivadis is summoned back to the Hall of Prophecies and saw an orb with a vision of a person trying to avoid clinical areas of a hospital, and in particular the emergency department or ICU. Then a guardian known as Therese shows up, asking Daxivadis if he knew about the Sarkikos community. Daxivadis knew well about this, but had not really understood what this all meant. Therese explained that the Sarkikos community is still connected to the element Mother Earth through these gold cords and under her sustenance. However, if the Sarkikos community gets disconnected, they will be under the sustenance of the Hubertiges. Daxivadis still does not know what all this means. Therese explains that this indicates the power of the Kronos is gaining. Daxivadis is still confused. Therese then explains that if the Kronos is in power, those tied to the Semitic Sarkikos community will also lose access to the sustenance of element all the time. Daxivadis then starts to understand that the hospital becomes the ultimate source of sustenance, with the over-involved state demanding workplaces, schools, authoritarian families, and fundamentalist religions becoming the only second in power. Daxivadis asks if this is the work of Helectivus, as Oscar and Dorneil's findings had been made public. Therese explains that Helectivus was not in charge of this community, but that she had some idea who was in charge of the community.